Hi everyone, this is William with the Grand Duke Dmitri video series on YouTube, and we are jumping ahead 20 years from the previous video when we were 1915. Now today's video is 1935. We have some new material. Our recap back in 1915. We had Dmitri only his first full day back in Petrograd and already going to the yacht club to do some gambling on billiards, but he also made time in the evening to go and with Maria and have dinner at their father's house in Tsarskoye Selo. Lots of interesting people there. And for 1935, the previous 1935 video, we had Dmitri writing an essay called Fathers and Children, about the generation gap to a certain extent, and about how young Russian emigres were kind of feeling directionless. They, hadn't been born in Russia in many instances, or had left in infancy, basically, and were having a hard time feeling like they were Russians, although they wanted to. And so Dmitri was addressing those things. And we finished that in one go. Our cast today, we have Kirill and Kazem-Bek, the two who are always present in these speeches and essays in 1935. And today's new speech was given in Nice in the south of France on the 31st of August, 1935. And the occasion was a Young Russia assembly there in Nice. And the name given to the speech in the printed copy is, in quotes, "We will not rest on our laurels." All right, I am going to try once again to fit the whole thing in. So we'll see how that works out. Since the day when, with the blessing of the sovereign, I took over the chairmanship of the main council of the Young Russia Party, I have not only wanted, but found it absolutely necessary to personally visit as many Young Russia centers as I could in order to familiarize myself as closely as possible with the work in the field. The head and I were in Brussels. We then visited Montargis, Vichy, Lyon, and the camp in Saint-Tropez. Wherever we went, there were always meetings with young Russians from neighboring departments, towns, and localities. Thus, I had the opportunity to see almost the entire 2nd District of France personally. The overall impression in every instance was good. It goes without saying that in those places where they have already succeeded through great sacrifice and effort in acquiring their own premises, work on behalf of the party has been particularly successful. But we cannot rest on our laurels, and I have the impression that some of us are already doing so. The mere fact of having become a young Russian doesn't mean the end of effort and achievement. Quite the contrary. It's not enough just to put on the blue shirt. A young Russian should strive to be a leader, to inspire confidence and enthusiasm. I must say that, unfortunately, this is not true everywhere. A clubby atmosphere has developed in some places, i.e. the young Russians in some chapters are living isolated lives contained within their own circles, interested only in what's happening in their own midst. The direct result of such compartmentalization is to repel new elements rather than attract them. You must remember that to be a young Russian is to be a patriot, to love Russia, past, present, and future. It seems like it should be easy to approach any Russian on that basis, but such activity is not observed everywhere. Every young Russian who has passed the party test and taken the solemn pledge should be able to act not only as a preacher, but also a recruiter. Each of you must be able to explain our program calmly and intelligently and not scare away those who are interested in our movement by offering harsh replies or simply inept explanations. I would like to draw your special attention to the percentage of young Russians residing in the Russian colonies in various locations. In Toulon, for example, we number more than 10%, while in many other places the percentage is often incomparably less. You can see for yourself that there's a problem, and the problem is yours in the field. There's no way we at the top can deal with every single person who's interested in our movement. We provide you with an idea, we teach you, and we give you a plan of action, pointing the way. But you, rank and file young Russians, should, on an individual basis, make every effort to create groups made up of people in your locality who are interested in our ideas. The fact that I, who am so closely connected to Kazem-Bek, play a direct role in our common work on behalf of Young Russia should reveal to all of you the bond that existed and exists between Young Russia and the head of the dynasty. I say this chiefly for the information of those who, without bothering to look into our ideas or our literature, continue to say that we are practically Bolsheviks. The dynasty connects you directly to the traditions of the past, giving the members of the Young Russia movement the right to call themselves heirs of the Russian historical tradition. What I am saying today, I say not just to you personally, but through you to young Russians scattered throughout the entire world. I wish you success in your important work. So we've got some admonition going on here from the boss. Well, the assistant boss, I guess. The boss is definitely the Kazem-Bek, the head, as Dmitri calls him, and dynastically Kirill. Okay, yeah, it's almost like one of St. Paul's letters to the churches scattered around Asia Minor saying, hey, get your act together, right? All right, let's see. What do I have in my notes? So Dmitri tells us that he has taken on the chairmanship with the sovereign's blessing, the sovereign being, of course, Gasudar Kirill Vladimirovich. So yes, apparently this is something, we've got some subtext going on here. This is something he wants to emphasize, that Young Russia is not apart from Kirill, that Kirill is involved. Okay, the road trip. Well, this there's an account of this in the biography of Kazem-Bek that I should probably read some excerpts from. It's quite charming. So he and Dmitri, and I think one servant, were on the road. Well, they did have a driver, I believe. They were on the road driving throughout France, and Kazem-Bek described some of there was a particular restaurant that they always stopped at when they were in that vicinity, and so on and so forth. The classic road trip. The camp that's referred to is nothing sinister. It's just a summer camp for children. And yeah, the whole thing just really reminds me of the road trip with Chanel in 1921. Okay, the reference to the blue shirt. This was the Young Russia uniform. They would wear light-colored trousers. It's hard to tell from the black and white photographs if they were, sort of khaki-colored or white or gray. I don't know, but the trousers are very light in relation to the very dark blue shirts. Black and brown were already taken, of course. So blue was the color of Young Russia. So here we have Dmitri, admonishing these various local groups not to treat Young Russia as a club, It's not the Boy Scouts. It's a party now. It's a movement. Go into all the world and spread the gospel. There's kind of almost that element to it, right? I mean, he actually says you're preachers and recruiters. So he makes it sound like they're meant to be missionaries. The reference to the party test, well, I'm not sure the details of that. I need to review what I've already read in Viktor Kosik's book about young Russia, an excellent book based very much on primary sources. He got access to an archive with lots of internal young Russia documents. The bond between young Russia and the head of the dynasty. Okay, so Kirill was not out there giving speeches. He would make appearances, but clearly he realized that the head of the dynasty cannot also be the head of a political party. He's already really pushing the envelope with that. Yeah, so Dmitri is saying, I am the link and I am the proof, showing that this is something that is dynastic, that is approved of by Kirill. And this is the first overt reference to this accusation of crypto-Bolshevism. You know, my friend Ed brought to my attention one source. I can't remember who was the man writing it, talking about an evening in Monte Carlo with a group of people. Amongst them was Chanel, but Dmitri was already married to Audrey, and he turns up, and one of the first things he says is, I am not a Bolshevik. You know, so this was pretty widespread, I think, and it must have been very annoying for him. You can imagine, I'm sure. But, you know, there was something behind it. We've already talked about the reference to the Spark and the Young Russia Manifesto, both of them part of the revolutionary movement in Imperial Russia. So the Young Russians were very much consciously playing on that. And also this idea that I've mentioned several times, that Kazem-Bek was indeed a Russian agent, or at least an asset, the latter certainly, and he would indeed end up going back and living out his days in the Soviet Union after the end of the Second World War. So this is an interesting tradition that goes beyond the situation in 1935, and the Russian example specifically, and that is, who is the heir to the cultural or historical legacy of any given country? Is it everybody who's a citizen of that country, or is it exclusively held by one group of people? I mean, Dmitri is not claiming that it's one group of people. He would have a broader, as we've seen, definition of that than the right wing of the Russian immigration, who were saying, you know, that people in the Soviet Union were cut off from that. They were not bearers of the Russian historical tradition. Dmitri and Kazem-Bek, would apply that much more broadly. But it's an interesting question overall. That's one I need to think about. You know, what in my own country, in other countries, who is a bearer of the legacy of that country, and is it possible for someone who has immigrated, whether they were forced to or not, to be a bearer of the history or culture of that country? Now, we talked about Jean Amaury last time, who a Jewish German man who emigrated to Belgium, and he would have said in this essay of his that I highly recommend, that in his book At the Mind's Limits, that that he wasn't a bearer anymore of the German historical tradition, which hitherto he had loved. You know, Goethe and everything that had nothing to do with the Nazis. Still, after the experience of being not just having to voluntarily emigrate, but being rejected. And after the war, he was received with open arms, but he just couldn't believe in that anymore. So he would say, no, if you've been kicked out, you are no longer an heir to the historical tradition or a bearer of the historical tradition of your country. Dmitri obviously did not feel that way. Okay, anyway, what do we have next time? Well, when we return to 1935, we will have one of these short excerpts, an excerpt from a speech that Dmitri gave in November 1935 in Kirill's presence. We don't have the whole speech, unless possibly this was the whole speech and it was just a sort of he was introducing somebody else like Kazem-Bek. I don't know. Kirill would not have been one of the speakers. But you know, it's very interesting. Each one of these raises some, even though there's such a consistency, a thematic consistency with them, each one of them raises specific questions, and they're getting more and more contentious. You know, Dmitri is personally, and probably the whole organization, is feeling more and more under pressure, and yeah, with this accusation that they're Bolsheviks. Okay, when we return to 1915, which will be the next video, we will have both Ducky and the Yusupovs. We'll have more fun and games at the yacht club, and in the midst of that, we will have at least an acknowledgement of the war and some activity related to the war. So yeah, please come back for all that, and I'll see you then. Bye.